Have you ever felt that the more you give, the less you are valued? Have you ever wondered why, just when you decide to leave, cut off contact, and go silent, they come back? They say they miss you, that they realized how important you were. But why now? Why only after you left? I am Freud, and if you allow me, let's do something together that no one has ever done for you. Let's listen to this symptom. Let's decipher the unconscious logic behind this pattern that hurts so much. I don't want to give you superficial advice about self-esteem. I want to take you to the depths of your psyche, where the real reasons why you are only remembered in your absence are hidden. But be warned, this analysis will not be comfortable. We will open old wounds. We will talk about desire, abandonment, a childhood you may not even remember. Because what repeats itself in love is always an echo of what has already been experienced. And what you call a relationship may actually be a reenactment of something much older, a desperate attempt to be seen by someone who never really looked at you. Let's begin. There is a scene that repeats itself in many people's lives. They love intensely, give themselves completely, are always available. But the other person seems indifferent, absent, even cruel. And when they finally have the courage to leave, or simply to remain silent, the unthinkable happens. The other person comes back, as if only now they have felt something, as if value only existed in absence. This is no coincidence. This is psychological structure, that human beings do not deal well with loss. But it is not the loss itself. It is what the loss triggers in the unconscious. Symbolic castration. In simple terms, when someone leaves, what was once guaranteed, predictable, given, suddenly becomes inaccessible, and everything that is inaccessible becomes desirable. Because desire is born from limitation, from prohibition, from what is missing. That is what you represent when you leave, the lost object, the fantasy of what was not lived, but could have been. Your absence becomes a stage for projections. You become everything the person wanted, but only now that they can't have it. But notice, this is not love. This is wounded narcissism. It is the other person's ego trying to repair a symbolic loss that hurts their illusion of control. It is not about you, but about what you represent when you are no longer available. Deep down, we were all shaped in a very old theater, that of childhood. That's where we learn what it's like to be loved or not to be. For many of us, love came with conditions. We were only seen when we did something right. We were only welcomed when we stopped bothering others. We grew up confusing love with performance. And then we became adults who tried to deserve attention. Do you see? Your pattern of always being available, of explaining, of insisting, of forgiving, that's not weakness, it's repetition. An unconscious attempt to recreate an unresolved relationship, hoping that this time the ending will be different. But it won't be, because the unconscious doesn't seek healing, it seeks repetition. The compulsion to repeat is a deep mechanism that leads us to live again and again the same emotional scripts, as if we wanted, with each new partner, to rewrite the ending of our childhood story. And here's the paradox. The more you give yourself, the less the other person sees you. Because you are no longer missing. You have become a constant presence. And everything that is constant becomes scenery. Desire needs distance, absence, space to fantasize. When you are there all the time, the other person doesn't need to desire. They just consume. It's cruel. But it's real. The human psyche is built around lack. What drives us is not what we have, but what we don't have. Babies cry because their mothers disappear. Love is born from the interval between need and satisfaction. If there is no interval, there is no desire. And what is not desired is not valued. You were trained from an early age to believe that, in order to be loved, you had to always be present, always available, always reacting. But that made you predictable. And the predictable is unconsciously perceived as worthless. Not out of malice, but because of structure. And here comes the superego, that psychic instance that represents morality, the internalized demands of parental authority. It tells you, you have to be there. You have to forgive. You have to be understanding. And the more you obey, the further you move away from your desire. That's when the symptom arises. Exhaustion, emptiness, the feeling of always giving and never receiving, of being remembered only in your absence. The symptom is the way the unconscious finds to wound you. Something is out of place. You abandoned yourself so you wouldn't be abandoned, but now something in you begins to awaken. You withdraw. You remain silent. Not because you want to manipulate, but because you can no longer stand being used as an emotional cushion for someone else's discomfort. And it is in this silence that you become valuable. Absence activates the desire of others, but more than that, it gives you back your power. Not the power to control others, but the power not to be controlled, to choose yourself, to protect yourself. And that's when the tables turn. Because those who only wanted you when you are always there, now find themselves faced with a puzzle. You withdrew. And desire needs to solve that puzzle. But it may already be too late, because you've started to feel something new. Peace. Yes, peace. That feeling you never really knew, because you were always fighting for crumbs of affection. The peace that comes when you stop begging for love and start building an inner space where you are enough. But this peace comes at a price. Mourning. Mourning for everything you expected from the other person and never got. Mourning for a childhood where you may have had to grow up too soon. Mourning for having given too much to those who didn't have the structure to receive you. I invite you now to look at this with courage. Because as long as you remain available to those who don't know what they have, you will continue to be remembered only when you are gone. Not because you are worth less, but because the other person is worth less to themselves and only realizes the value of what they lose, not what they have. That's why leaving sometimes is an act of love. Love for yourself, for what you are tired of repeating. Leaving can be the beginning of true presence, the one that begins within you. Do you remember the first time you felt you had to shut up to be accepted? Maybe it was in childhood, when something inside you screamed for attention, but no one listened. Or worse, they listened and taught you that feeling was too much. That crying was weakness. That asking was neediness. Since then, you have learned to be discreet in your pain, present in the chaos of others, and absent from yourself. And so, step by step, your psyche learned a silent code. To be loved, I must not be a burden. You grew up trying to fit in. You became the one who listens, who helps, who gives in. You became available. And you confuse that with love. But I ask you, how much of yourself did you have to abandon to fit into the expectations of others? The truth is that you created a character, an I that serves, that welcomes, that endures. But that I is not you. It is what the superego built on top of you. A set of demands inherited from authority figures who, without knowing it, planted in you the belief that your value depends on your usefulness. It's the mask you wear every day, the strong one, the mature one, the one who solves everything. But behind it is exhaustion. This exhaustion is not just physical, it is ontological. It is the exhaustion of a self that could never be, of a subjectivity that has been swallowed up by the needs of others. And then, when you start to withdraw, to set boundaries, to silence yourself, to refuse, the world reacts. Because the character you played was convenient. Your absence breaks the unconscious pact that sustained the relationships around you. The other person despairs, but not out of true love. They despair because they have lost control over what they used to regulate. themselves emotionally. You realize this. It's not personal. It's structural. The other person is trapped in their own wounds, and you are acting as an anesthetic. Your constant presence dulled their pain. And when you walk away, that pain returns. That's what they want to erase when they come looking. For you, it's not you. It's the relief you provided. It's cruel to admit it, but it's liberating to understand. You weren't loved. You were functional. And this is precisely where many people fall back into the same pattern. They rush back when they are sought after again, because they confuse the other person's desperation with love. But it's not. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from the emotional drug that you represented not. And here, I want to invite you to take another look. Why do you need to be so necessary to someone else? Because at some point, usually very early on, your psyche understood that being loved meant being useful. That love came at a price, that you would only have value if you filled a void. That was the script you learned. And now, unconsciously, you seek relationships where you can play that role. The name for this? Repetition. You give yourself compulsively, hoping deep down to be loved as you never have been. But the logic of repetition is perverse. It always puts you in the same place. The more you strive to be loved, the more you nullify yourself. The more you try to keep the other person, the more you lose yourself. And ironically, it is only when you leave that the other person looks at you. But that's not love. That's projection. It's as if your absence awakens a repressed, forgotten, neglected part of the other person, and for a brief moment they idealize you. But as soon as you return, it all starts again. Because the cycle was never about the two of you. It was about your respective shortcomings. You need to understand, the unconscious doesn't want happiness. It wants consistency. And consistent, for your psychic history, means repeating. Repeating the same search, the same pain, the same pattern, because it's familiar. And the familiar gives a false sense of security, even if it hurts. That's why it's so hard to break up with relationships where you're only seen when you walk away. Because there's a part of you that still believes that this time will be different. That this time, by leaving and being noticed, you'll finally be loved as you deserve. But being noticed isn't the same as being loved. Being remembered isn't the same as being valued, and going back to someone who only wants you when you're not. There is actually betraying yourself once again. I know it hurts. It hurts to admit that the love you hoped for may never come. It hurts to recognize that you've been content with crumbs of attention, as if they were banquets of affection. But it is this pain that can set you free, because pain that is felt is pain that is overcome. And only what is overcome can be transformed. Need to mourn. Not mourn the person who rejected you, but mourn the expectations you created. Mourn the illusion that if you were more of this or less of that, you would finally be loved. Mourn the inner child who believed they had to earn love. In mourning, you find yourself again. Not the character you learned to please, but the real being that lives within you. The one who desires, who feels, who has limits. Who deserves to be loved for existing, not for serving, but the world around who may not understand this change. People accustomed to your selflessness will accuse you of selfishness. They will say that you have changed. They will try to make you return to your old role, because your awakening threatens the structures that sustained the dynamics they knew. And you need to be prepared, because every process of individuation, this path of becoming who you are, goes through a period of loneliness. But it is in this loneliness that you discover your wholeness, that you learn to be with yourself without needing the reflection of approval in the eyes of others. You are not abandoned. You are not absent. You are present, but a presence that now chooses where, when, and with whom to be. You have stopped begging for affection. Now you invite it. And those who do not know how to accept a respectful invitation do not deserve your silent company. Absence is a language. When done consciously, it does not scream. It whispers truths. It reveals who approaches you out of love and who approaches you out of need, who wants you as a person and who wants you for a function. And in this discernment, you recover something precious. Your psychic energy. Yes, your energy. The energy you wasted trying to save others from their own wounds. The energy you diluted in conversations where no one listened to you. The energy you spent writing messages that were never read with the heart. Now, that energy returns. And with it, desire also returns, no longer the desire of others, but your own. The desire to live a life that is yours. To build relationships where you are seen in your presence, not just in your absence. Where love is not born from loss, but from encounter. And that encounter begins when you allow yourself to be whole. Even if that means, at first, being alone. Have you ever noticed how certain silences scream? How, when you withdraw from a relationship, something explodes on the other side. Messages that never came now arrive as pleas. People who ignored you suddenly declare their regret. But you have to ask, why now? Why only after you left? Because the other person is not reacting to you. They are reacting to the emptiness that your absence reveals within them. You have become a mirror, and now, in your absence, you show the reflection of a loneliness that they have always had but never faced. Here is one of the deepest secrets of the human soul. We project onto others what we lack. For a long time, you were the place where the other person hid their fears, their insecurity, their neediness. And, without realizing it, you began to carry pains that were not yours. Like an emotional container, you absorbed the anguish of others and offered affection as if that would guarantee your permanence. But true love is not born of usefulness. It is born of freedom, of choice. And only those who are not bound by necessity can truly choose. That's why when you leave, the other person goes into crisis. Because your absence forces them to face what was previously covered by your presence. The inner void they always had, and that you, without knowing it, tried to fill. But this void, like almost everything in the psyche, has no bottom. And the more you tried to fill it, the more it emptied. This is where the biggest mistake lies, believing that if you are enough, the other person will change. But what changes the other person is not your effort. It is their own pain. And even then, only if they are willing to go through it. Your constant presence only postpones this confrontation. Your absence, on the other hand, can be the beginning of an awakening. Theirs, yes, but mainly yours. It takes courage to walk away. But even more so, it takes courage not to return when they finally notice you. Because at that moment, the wounded child inside you will scream, "Now it will work." But that scream is not real. It is a memory. It is the echo of an old, childish desire that always wanted to be loved the right way. The problem is that you keep trying to pick fruit from trees that have no roots. You are not leaving a person. You are leaving a dynamic, an unconscious pact that says, "I sacrifice myself, you tolerate me." But what you really want is love. And true love does not tolerate. Love welcomes. Love celebrates your existence, not your function. It's hard to accept this, because it requires you to acknowledge all the times you mistook crumbs for banquets, all the times you settled for the minimum, hoping that one day the maximum would come. But it didn't come, and maybe it never would have so you left. And the other person felt it. But what they felt wasn't love. It was the dismantling of an unconscious system that used you as an escape valve. Your silence disrupts. Your absence deconstructs. Because you were a key player in the other person's emotional theater. And now, without you, the script fails. The act stops. That's when the comeback comes. But that request isn't about you. It's about the relief your presence provided. And if you do come back, know this. The cycle will start again. Maybe with flowers, promises, tears. But soon the curtains will open again, and the plot will be the same. You giving more to receive less. That is why, often, true transformation only happens in mourning. Not the mourning of another, but your own. Mourning for the idealized love. For the story you created in your head that never came to fruition. Mourning for the child who dreamed of security but grew up in uncertainty. And in that mourning, something precious is born. Emotional autonomy. You stop living according to other people's responses. You stop measuring yourself by the eyes of others. And you start living from within yourself. But here comes a dilemma. What if no one else wants me? What if, when I am no longer useful, I become invisible? This question reveals the most primitive fear of the psyche, the fear of being abandoned, because the baby we once were could not survive without others. We needed the care of others to exist, and part of us still believes that. This is true. That is why we create a distorted logic. If I am not wanted, I will die. But that is no longer real. Today, you survive. What's more, you can live. You can exist without bowing down. You can relate to others without nullifying yourself. But only if you understand that your presence is valuable, even when it is not. Useful. And the curious thing is that when you stop trying to be loved, when you simply are, true relationships begin to emerge. Because what is authentic does not require effort. It requires truth. And truth is what you find when you stop chasing after those who only see your back. You need to stop going back to those who only recognize you when you're not there. Because that's a subtle form of self-destruction. It's like saying, I'm only worth something when I'm not there. But you are worth something because you exist. And your existence doesn't need validation from others to have meaning. The freedom you seek is not outside. It's inside. And it begins the moment you say, enough. Enough begging for attention. Enough begging for recognition. Enough emotionally. Mutilating yourself to fit into spaces that diminish you. You can and should be whole, even if it scares you. Because the world isn't used to whole people. Whole people aren't manipulable. They aren't predictable. They aren't convenient, but whole people are free. And freedom is what you deserve, . So, the next time someone only comes looking for you after you're gone, remember, it's not you they want. It's the comfort your presence offered. And you weren't born to be anyone's emotional crutch. You were born to be whole, to be true, to be free. Have you ever noticed that behind every pattern of abandonment, there is a repressed desire to be chosen? Not just wanted, but chosen, seen, prioritized. As if deep down, there is a child sitting on the stairs, waiting for someone to finally say, you are enough. You can stop trying. But the world didn't say that. And so you grew up trying to become someone worthy of staying. That attempt shaped your affections. It made you accept crumbs as if they were promises. It made you tolerate silences that screamed rejection. And worst of all, it made you believe that your pain was an exaggeration, that your love was too much, and that your absence was the only way to be noticed. But now you begin to see that wasn't love. It was an unconscious plot, a silent repetition of a childhood where you had no space to be whole, where you had to adapt to survive. And that's why your constant presence was never valued. Because it wasn't chosen. It was expected. And what is expected becomes a habit. Habit becomes comfort. And comfort does not provoke desire. It provokes dependence. You are confused with a function. And functions have no soul. They are activated, not loved. When you were always there, you were just an emotional button. Pressed when the other person needed you. Ignored when you were not useful. But when you withdrew, you broke the machine, and now the other person doesn't know what to do. Because they never learned to love. They only learned to use. And what is used is lost when it breaks. Except you didn't break. You woke up, Dot, and this awakening is scary. Because it requires you to reevaluate everything. Your history, your choices, your affections. It forces you to face how much you kept quiet to be accepted. How kind you were so as not to be abandoned. How much you denied your pain to keep others close. But what about you? Who stayed with you when you decided to stay with others? No one, not even you. That's the deepest wound. Realizing that in trying not to lose anyone, you lost yourself. And now, as you walk away, you feel a strange kind of grief, not for them, but for who you were for so long. A docile, helpful, invisible character. But that character is dying. And with him dies the illusion that your absence is the only way to be seen. Now you want something more. You want presence. You want reciprocity. You want love that lasts, even when you're not useful. But that's not found in the cries of those who search for you in the desperation of loss. It's built in the silence of those who stay, even when you're not trying to impress them, Dot. So when someone says, "I only realized it when you were gone," listen calmly. Not with a hungry heart, but with an alert mind. Ask yourself, do they want me or have they lost me? They are different things. Those who want you build. Those who lost you regret it. But regret is not commitment. It is guilt. And guilt does not sustain love-only temporary attempts at reparation. You deserve more than that. You deserve someone who sees your value in your presence, not just in your absence. Someone who chooses you for who you are, not for what you represent. Someone who wants to be with you, even when you're silent, even when you're not saving anyone. And maybe that person hasn't arrived yet. Maybe, right now, you really are alone. But that loneliness, as painful as it may seem, is the foundation of something new. It's not punishment. It's purification. You are cleansing yourself of distortions. You are undoing the psychic knots that tied you to the role of martyr. You are finally becoming whole, Dot, and being whole, contrary to what you have heard, does not drive love away. It attracts it. But it attracts the right kind of love, the kind that does not despair in your absence, that does not pressure you to be present, that respects you even in silence. But for that, you need to stand firm. Don't go back to the cycle. Don't be seduced by a belated request, because love that only comes after the end is not love. It's attachment. And attachment is not a bond. It's a prison. Remember, your absence should not be your main language. It may be the beginning of the breakup, but it should not be the foundation of the relationship. True love is sustained by conscious presence, not by provoked absence. So stop using abandonment as a test. Stop waiting for someone to finally realize your worth when you leave. You don't have to be absent to be important. You just need to be with someone who sees you. But that someone starts with you. You need to see yourself. Accept yourself. Choose yourself. Not because it's beautiful, but because it's urgent. Your soul is tired of begging. It's exhausted from repeating itself. It's thirsty for authenticity. And authenticity begins when you say, "Enough of just being absent. I want to be a living, real, visible presence. Even if, in the beginning, I'm the only one who sees me." That's how you heal. Not by being loved, by those who ignored you, but by loving yourself enough not to go back. By choosing yourself, even if no one else does. Because self-love is not narcissism, it's emotional survival. And if you think no one will love you like this, whole and true, remember, the world always tries to keep people broken. Because broken people are easier to mold. But you weren't born to be molded. You were born to be. And being, sometimes, is the most revolutionary way to love and to exist. And now, after everything, I ask you, what still ties you to someone who only wants you when you're gone? Maybe there's still hope. The persistent illusion that if someone looks for you when you're gone, it's because deep down they love you. But don't fool yourself. Love isn't late. Love doesn't arrive late. Love doesn't need your absence to awaken. What arrives late is guilt. It's the fear of loss. It's the discomfort with the emptiness you leave behind, not you yourself. If you need to leave to be seen, and you are never truly seen, and there is nothing lonelier than feeling invisible in someone's presence. Being with someone who sees you only as a function, not as a person, is to be in a state of constant abandonment, even when accompanied. But now, at this point in the analysis, something in you has changed. You no longer want to sustain bonds that consume you. You no longer want to serve as a mirror for anyone's wounded ego. You want mutual presence, real exchange, an encounter between wholes, not between halves that tolerate each other. But for that, there is a price. And that price is letting go of the childish desire to be rescued. You will not be saved by anyone. No one will fill the void of your childhood. No one will give you the lap you never had, the hug that never came, the look you waited so long for. But you can and must be the adult who welcomes that child. You can become the presence you have always sought. And in doing so, you not only heal yourself, you break the cycle. You end generations of unconscious repetition. You free not only yourself, but those who will come after you. Yes, you will lose some people in the process. But consider this. They were never truly with you. They were with your role, with the security you offered, with the part you played. And now, without that role, you reveal who really sees you and who just uses you. This is where many people get scared, because this filter is cruel. Suddenly, friends disappear, lovers walk away, family accuse you. But all of this is revelation. It's as if the absence you offer finally illuminates the shadows around you. Now you see who really stays, and why. And maybe, for a while, no one will stay. But that's okay, because the external silence will be filled by a new presence, yours. And that's the only one you can control, the only one you can promise, the only one that will accompany you to the end. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop searching. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You no longer need to be remembered for being absent. You are respected for being whole. And those who stay will stay by choice, out of love, not out of dependence or need, but that love only comes when you are ready. And being ready is not about being perfect. It's about being true. It's being able to say, I no longer need you to. Want me to feel worthy. That is liberation. And with it comes peace. A peace that does not depend on others valuing you, but on you recognizing yourself. A peace that does not fear loneliness, because it has become a source, not a threat. Now you can love freely. You can choose to be, and you can choose to leave. You can give, and you can deny. You can be absent without guilt. You can be present without fear. And when someone comes looking for you again, trying to activate the old script, you will recognize the pattern. But something in you will no longer react, because the wounded child who cried out for recognition has been welcomed. And now she sleeps peacefully, because you stayed. Finally, you stayed with yourself. And that is the silent revolution that transforms everything. You are no longer remembered only when you leave, because now those who matter see you when you are there. And those who don't see you don't deserve you. I close this analysis with the only truth that truly liberates. The love you seek outside can only be fully felt when you find it within. And when that encounter happens, all absence loses its power, because you have become present in yourself. And no one else has the right to erase that. If you felt that this analysis touched you, reflected you, or revealed something profound to you, then don't thank me. Thank your psyche, which is finally being heard. And if you want to continue this journey of listening, diving, and self-discovery, you know where to find me. But remember, the real analysis begins when the video ends and you close your eyes. To hear what has been trying to tell you for so long. Until then, stay whole.